Welcome back, traveler. Tonight we drift far from the modern world, beyond the glow of the city, into a land of dust and silence. This is the Wild West, not the shining legend told in movies, but the real, quiet, and lonely frontier where each sunset brought a cold wind, and every sound carried across miles of open land. As the campfire crackles and the night air settles in, let your mind slow down. If you are new here, this is Sleepy History Stories, a place where the past unfolds gently, told slowly, to help you rest. If you enjoy these journeys through forgotten times, you can leave a like or subscribe for more sleepy tales from history. Now settle beside the fire. You can hear the soft whistle of wind across the plains, the quiet shifting of the sand, the distant call of a coyote. Close your eyes and let us travel together to a night in the Wild West, where the air is dry, the stars are endless, and survival is a whisper between man and nature. The frontier was not a place of noise and music, but of silence so deep it seemed alive. When dawn rose, it came with a pale yellow sky and the sound of boots pressing into dry earth. The men and women who lived here woke before the sun, for the land did not wait for comfort. There were no clocks, only the steady pull of the light, the warmth that faded too soon. Imagine the scent of dry sage drifting through the air. The wind moved across endless grass, brushing over wooden fences, weathered barns, and abandoned wagons. A man might live 50 miles from the nearest neighbor, and when he saw a rider in the distance, he would stop his work to watch, unsure if it was a friend or a stranger passing by. The Wild West was a place that stripped people down to the simplest form of living. There was no space for pride, no time for ease. Every day meant hauling water, mending fences, keeping animals safe from coyotes, and praying that the small supply of grain would last until the next town delivery. The roads were trails of dust, and the trails were sometimes nothing at all, only memory and direction. As the sun rose higher, the world turned gold and dry. The heat shimmered on the horizon, blurring the shapes of cattle, wagons, and faraway trees. Those who worked the land often tied a cloth across their mouth to keep out the dust. Their hands were dry and cracked from work, their eyes squinting against the glare of the plains. In every shadow, the promise of cool air felt like a small miracle. Homes were built from whatever could be found, logs, clay, stone, or even grass sod. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and sweat. Walls were rough, floors uneven, and roofs creaked with every gust of wind. But for many, this was all they had, a small shelter against a vast and uncaring sky. At midday, life slowed down. Men rested under the rare shade of a tree, while women hung laundry that stiffened in the sun. Children watched from doorways, tracing lines in the dust with sticks, dreaming of towns they might never see. Silence was a companion, broken only by the soft hum of insects and the far-off call of a hawk. Evening brought the sound of distant hooves, as someone returned from the fields or from a neighboring ranch. The smell of beans, cornbread, or salted meat filled the air. The sun fell quickly, and the world turned red and gray. Lanterns flickered in the windows of scattered homes, tiny lights in a sea of emptiness. When night finally settled, the Wild West grew colder. Wind swept across the land with a long, low sigh. Coyotes began their song, and every creak of wood sounded louder in the quiet. Those who lay by the fire stared into the flames, watching sparks rise into the dark sky. It was a beauty both haunting and lonely, a beauty that few could live with for long. For travelers passing through, a single night on the plains could feel endless. The stars above were so bright they almost glowed blue, and the stillness seemed to hold time and place. It was easy to imagine that the world would always stay this way, vast, dry, and eternal. But the West was never kind to dreamers. It demanded endurance, silence, and a deep understanding that nature always won. And so, as you rest tonight beneath this endless sky, you might understand why few could survive a single night here. Not because of bandits or beasts, but because of the quiet, the solitude, and the unyielding truth of the land itself. The road in the Wild West was not made for comfort. It was a thin, uneven trail cut through open land, stretching farther than the eye could see. When a rider set out, he rode not for hours, but for days, the horizon his only companion. The dust clung to his coat, his hat, his throat. Each breath tasted like the earth itself. The sun ruled the sky without mercy. Its heat shimmered above the plains, bending light and shape until the land looked like water. Cowboys wrapped their scarves around their faces, not to look brave, but to keep the wind from filling their lungs with grit. The rhythm of hooves became the heartbeat of the frontier, steady, endless, echoing across miles of emptiness. Along the way there were markers few could see, unless they knew where to look: a leaning fence post, a pile of stones, a single bent tree that meant water was near. Most travelers learned quickly that the map meant little. The land had its own rules, and it cared nothing for those who crossed it. At night, the world turned silver beneath the moon. Campfires dotted the dark like quiet stars fallen to earth. Men sat beside them with coffee that was mostly water and beans that had cooked too long. They spoke softly, if they spoke at all. Stories passed between them, about cattle drives, about outlaws seen on the horizon, about towns that promised safety and never delivered it. The cowboy life was far from the legend that would later fill songs and films. It was a life of exhaustion. Days began before sunrise, with the herding of cattle that stretched across valleys and rivers. There were no days off, no reward for endurance, only the promise of another long road. Their pay was small, their beds were the ground, and their sky was both roof and reminder that they were small beneath it. Sometimes a rider would spot dust rising far ahead, another traveler. It could mean danger, or it could mean a rare moment of company. When they met, they did not always share words. A nod, a gesture, a silent exchange of coffee or tobacco was enough. Each understood the other's tiredness. Each knew that the road did not belong to men, but to the wind and the sun. Outlaws moved across the same land, though not always for survival. Some were desperate men escaping debts or past mistakes. Others had been made criminals by hunger, or by bad luck that left them with no home to return to. They hid in canyons and abandoned mines, moving by night to avoid the law. Theirs was a life that burned quickly, bright, violent, and short. But even they feared the land, for no man could conquer the silence that stretched between towns. In the distance, small towns waited like fragile promises, clusters of wood and dust. A saloon, a stable, a few stores, and a jail that looked like it could blow away with a strong wind. When riders entered, the streets were empty but for the soft creak of a signboard and the clatter of a loose shutter. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with the smell of whiskey and tired laughter. A piano might play, but even its notes sounded weary. Men drank not for joy, but to forget the distance waiting outside the door. At dusk, the last light of day stretched across the land in shades of red and gold. Horses stood still, their breath visible in the cooling air. The cowboys removed their hats, wiped their faces, and watched as the horizon swallowed the sun. There was beauty in it, a quiet beauty that carried both comfort and sorrow. For when darkness came, the plains felt endless once more, and the thought of home seemed like a distant dream. As the fire crackled and shadows grew long, they lay beneath the stars, listening to the low hum of the earth, the slow shift of the wind through dry grass, and the faint sound of coyotes singing somewhere beyond the hills. Each man carried the same thought as he drifted toward sleep, that the Wild West was not something you could tame or survive through strength. It was something you could only endure for as long as it allowed you to stay. And as you rest now beside that same campfire, the night sky above you glowing with soft light, you begin to understand that surviving a night here was never about danger from others, but about facing the vast, silent loneliness that stretched from one horizon to the next. Morning in a frontier town began not with noise, but with the soft scrape of a broom against a wooden porch. Dust gathered overnight, blown in by the desert wind, and by dawn it already lay thick along every windowsill and doorstep. The air was cool, then still touched by the night. It would not stay that way for long. The main street was always the same, one narrow road of packed earth, lined with buildings that leaned just slightly under the weight of time. Their signs swung gently from chains, the paint faded by sun and rain. General store, blacksmith, saloon, post office, a few names hand-painted, others carved roughly into the wood. If you listened closely, you could hear the faint buzz of flies, the creak of boards beneath your boots, and somewhere in the distance, the muffled sound of a horse shifting in its stall. The first to rise were always the merchants. They had work to do before the sun rose high enough to make everything heavy. Barrels were rolled from wagons, sacks of flour stacked behind counters, and shelves swept clean with quiet efficiency. They were not rich men, but steady ones, the kind who kept the town alive between the chaos of cattle drives and the silence of the desert. A bell might ring as a door opened, and a woman in a faded dress would step inside. She would speak softly, ask for salt, sugar, or kerosene. Her hands would be worn, her face shaded by a bonnet. They would exchange coins that had passed through 100 other hands, each coin a story of its own, a gambler's loss, a rancher's pay, a miner's hope. By mid-morning the town grew warmer and busier. The blacksmith's hammer began its steady rhythm, a slow, metallic heartbeat that echoed through the air. Children ran barefoot along the street, chasing one another through the dust. Dogs barked, roosters crowed, and someone in the saloon began to tune a guitar. It was not a peaceful place, but it was alive in its own slow, fragile way. The saloon stood at the center, half-shadowed even at noon. Its bat-wing doors never stayed still for long. Inside, the air carried the thick scent of tobacco, whiskey, and old wood. The piano stood near the corner, its surface scarred by years of use. During the day, it was a place of rest, a space for the tired to gather, to talk quietly, to forget for a moment the endless labor outside its walls. A card game might be underway, though not every hand was fair. Coins clinked softly, glasses slid across the counter, and a lazy voice might call out for another drink. There was no rush, no laughter too loud, only the steady rhythm of quiet lives waiting for evening to come. Upstairs, a window looked out over the empty street. You could see the horizon from there, a thin line of pale light that never seemed to move. The land stretched endlessly, but the town was its heart. People came and went, but the buildings stayed, like old guardians weathered by time. Outside, a wagon rolled slowly by, its wheels leaving shallow lines in the dirt. The driver nodded at the blacksmith, who raised his hammer in reply. A preacher passed, coat dusty and worn, speaking to no one as he walked toward the small wooden church at the edge of town. Its bell would ring once at noon, a hollow sound carried by the wind. When the sun reached its highest point, the world seemed to pause. The street shimmered with heat, and even the horses stood still, tails flicking lazily at flies. In that quiet, every sound became sharper, the groan of a door hinge, the faint rustle of paper as a newspaper drifted down the road. It was a silence heavy with life, not absence. By late afternoon, shadows returned. The air cooled slightly, and the saloon began to fill again. Merchants closed their shutters. Children were called inside. A lantern flickered to life above the doorway, its glow soft and golden against the wood. The same faces gathered, farmers, ranchers, travelers. They spoke of rain that never came, of cattle that had wandered too far, of friends they had not seen in months. The night came slowly, and with it a kind of peace. The street darkened until only the windows of the saloon glowed faintly, and the sound of a lone guitar drifted through the warm night air. Its melody was not joyous, but calm, a soft lullaby for a town that had learned to survive in a world that forgot it often. If you stood outside then, you could smell the faint sweetness of kerosene and hear the sigh of wind passing through open shutters. The stars shone clearly above the rooftops, and the land beyond the edge of town became nothing more than shadow and memory. For all its hardship, there was something enduring about life here, something slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The Wild West was not all gunfire and glory. It was routine, habit, and resilience. It was dust that never settled, and people who learned to live quietly within it. So as you lie now beneath the soft hum of a distant guitar, imagine that street, the soft glow of lamplight, the muted laughter inside the saloon, and the quiet promise that come morning the town will still be standing, just as it has always been. The land was vast enough to make a person feel both free and forgotten. Beyond the edge of every small town, the open frontier began. An ocean of dust and grass that moved in soft waves beneath the endless sky. The horizon stretched so far that it was easy to believe the world had no end. But with that beauty came silence, a silence so deep that it could unsettle even the strongest hearts. Days on the frontier did not pass quickly. They unfolded slowly, marked by the path of the sun and the habits of the land. At dawn, the first light crept across the plains like spilled milk, touching the tall grass and the wood of lonely cabins. The air was cool then, almost sweet. You could hear the low hum of insects and the faint song of birds hidden in the brush. It was the only sound before the wind rose. The families who lived out here did not wake to noise or comfort. They woke to the groan of wood, the rattle of a window, or the distant call of cattle. A small fire was coaxed to life, and breakfast was plain, cornbread, beans, or whatever had lasted through the week. Water came from a well, heavy and slow to draw. Each day began with quiet tasks that never truly ended. Fences to mend, tools to repair, fields to check, and animals to tend. There was little rest on the frontier. The land demanded attention and repaid it only with survival. The sun grew fierce by noon, the kind of heat that blurred the air and made distance shimmer like water. Hats and scarves shielded the skin, but the wind still carried dust into every fold of fabric. By afternoon, even the strongest learned to move slowly, to match the pace of the land itself. Then came the storms. They did not arrive politely. They came like a curtain pulled across the world. Dark clouds gathered low, thick, and heavy, until the plains turned gray beneath them. The wind shifted, first as a whisper, then as a roar. Horses grew restless, doors were bolted, and lanterns flickered inside. The air tasted of metal, sharp and cold. Rain did not fall gently here. It struck the roof like stones, filling the air with a rhythm both violent and hypnotic. Lightning flashed so bright it turned night to day for an instant, and thunder rolled through the open land with a power that made the walls tremble. But as sudden as it came, the storm would pass, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and smoke from dampened fires. When quiet returned, it was deeper than before, a stillness so complete that it felt as though the world itself was resting. People would step outside, breathe in the cool air, and look to the horizon to see if the storm had taken anything with it. Often it had. A fence gone, a roof loosened, a few animals scattered. But life went on, quietly, patiently. The solitude of the frontier was something few could endure. There were no crowds, no markets, no endless talk. Just the sound of wind through the grass and the creak of the cabin walls. Letters came rarely and visitors even less. A month might pass without a new face. Some grew lonely. Others found peace in it. But all understood that silence was the truest language of this land. At night, when the chores were done and the lanterns glowed faintly against the wooden walls, families would gather close to the fire. They would speak softly about the weather, about tomorrow, about small things that made the days feel less empty. Children would listen as their parents told stories, not of heroes or battles, but of their own lives, of journeys that brought them here, and of the hope that the next season would be kinder. Outside, the world was dark and endless. Coyotes called from the hills, their voices echoing through the night like ancient songs. The stars were brighter here than anywhere else, so many that it seemed they might spill from the sky. Each one flickered gently, a silent reminder that even in the loneliest places, light still lingered. The frontier taught patience. It taught endurance in a way no man-made hardship could. Here, people learned to move with the seasons, to listen to the wind, and to find beauty in things others might never notice. The smell of rain before it came, the warmth of sunlight after a storm, the comfort of firelight in the vast dark. To live in the Wild West was to live in rhythm with the earth itself, and that rhythm was slow, steady, and eternal. As you listen now, imagine that quiet, the fire beside you soft and low, the air filled with the faint scent of wood smoke and dust, the vast land breathing in calm waves around you. The night feels heavy but gentle. The stars are still watching, and somewhere far off another small fire burns, another soul resting after another long day on the edge of the world. The fire crackles softly now, smaller than before. Only the faintest glow remains, deep in the ash like the last heartbeat of a long day. The plains are quiet. The stars are clear and endless. And somewhere far away, a coyote sings its lonely song into the night. Welcome, once again, to the last chapter of our long ride through the Wild West. The fire is low, the air is cool, and the stories of the frontier fade like echoes in the dust. You have seen the long roads, the worn boots of cowboys, the lantern light of lonely saloons. Now, as the night deepens, we look back one last time on the fading world of the Old West. They say the West never truly ended, that its memory still breathes in the wind that moves across the sagebrush. But the time of the open range, of small towns made from planks and promise, slowly fell into shadow. The last herds of buffalo dwindled. The railroads cut through the silence, bringing the hum of machines where only hoofbeats once echoed. And the men who once roamed the plains began to settle, some willingly, others because there was nowhere left to roam. Old guns were hung above doors as reminders. Horses were replaced with iron locomotives that never tired. And the children who once played with wooden rifles grew up hearing stories from their fathers about how it used to be. Those stories changed with time. Each retelling soft to the edges made the dust more golden, the hardships less sharp. The West became not just a place, but a dream, a memory half remembered at dusk. If you stood there on the last day of the frontier, you might have seen the sun set over a town no one talks about now. A tired town with creaking signs and half-empty stores. A town where the blacksmith's hammer had gone silent and the saloon piano was out of tune. But if you listened closely, you could still hear faint laughter, the clink of a cup, the shuffle of boots. Ghost sounds carried by the wind, whispering that once this place was alive. Old cowboys sat by their doors, rocking slowly in wooden chairs, watching the last wagons vanish into the horizon. They did not speak much. They did not need to. They had seen everything: dust, storms and dawns, loss and laughter. And now they watched the world change and fade, knowing the West would soon belong to memory alone. As you listened to the soft rustle of the fire, imagine those final nights, when the stars were bright and the sky had no edge, when a man could ride for miles and never meet another soul, and yet somehow feel that the land itself was company enough. The wind was a friend. The coyotes were companions, and the crackle of fire was the heartbeat of the night. Even now, if you close your eyes and let your mind drift, you might still hear the rhythm of hooves far away. You might smell the smoke of campfires, faint but familiar, and you might see in the distance a lone rider crossing the twilight, his hat tilted low, his horse steady and calm, heading toward a horizon that never ends. Time passes. The fire fades to embers. The world of the Wild West becomes quiet again. The guns rest, the dust settles, and the stars, older than any frontier, shine above it all, unbothered by history or memory. The frontier sleeps now. Its heroes and drifters, its settlers and dreamers, they have all laid down their burdens and let the silence take them. And here, by the last campfire, you can do the same. Let your thoughts slow. Let the sound of the wind move softly through your mind. Let the past drift away like smoke rising into the night. The Wild West was never truly wild. It was human, full of hope, of hunger, of longing for a better life. It was not gold or gunfire that defined it, but quiet endurance. the courage to wake up again to another dry dawn, to keep going, no matter how far the horizon stretched. That same endurance is what carries us all, even now, in our quieter frontiers, our own deserts and long roads. And just like those who came before, we find peace not in what we conquer, but in what we remember. So rest now, traveler of the mind. The night is deep, the stars are calm, and the stories have been told. The campfire glows one last time before turning to silver ash. Tomorrow, another story waits. Another time, another place. But for now, you have reached the end of the road. The old west fades into the dark, and the gentle sound of wind carries its final lullaby. Thank you for riding through history with me tonight. If you enjoyed your stay by the fire, make sure to leave a light glowing by subscribing to Sleepy History Stories, where time slows down and then the past becomes a place of peace. Until next time, may your rest be long, your dreams be gentle, and your mind drift through the quiet plains of memory. Good night, traveler. Sleep well, and I will see you in the next story.